At the bottom of the card, scribbled in shaky handwriting, guests only. No titles. Karen and Mark Holloway raised Lina as their daughter after she came into their lives at the age of 4. For decades, they loved her as their own, but at Lina's baby shower, she publicly distances herself, calling them guests and naming her real family instead. This moment unravels the fragile truth Karen has been holding on to, that love, memory, and family may not be what she believed. Alright, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. She hadn't spoken to us in over a year. Then the lavender envelope came, delicate, cruel, final. Karen stood at the kitchen counter, flipping through junk mail, catalogs she never subscribed to, political flyers she'd never read. She almost threw it away without looking. A small lavender envelope. No return address. Her fingers paused on the embossed gold seal. There was something sterile about its elegance. Something deliberate. She ran her nail under the flap, carefully, as if opening it too quickly would make it vanish. Inside, a card with cursive lettering on heavy paper stock. You are warmly invited to the baby shower of Lina Grace Holloway, Saturday 2 p.m., Rose Garden Venue, RSVP by the 12th. Lina. She hadn't heard that name aloud in 14 months. Not since the day Lina walked out of their home, no fight, no goodbye. Just a silence that grew claws over time. Karen blinked, reading the card again. The baby shower. Not a phone call. Not a visit. A lavender envelope. Mark, she called out, her voice a whisper with teeth. He came in, rubbing sleep from his eyes, coffee steaming in one hand. You okay? She handed him the card. He read it once. Then again. His eyebrows raised slightly, not in joy, not in confusion, but in recognition of a wound that had just been reopened. Well, he said softly. I guess that's something. Karen stared at the last line of the invitation, written by hand, in Lina's old uneven print. The kind she used in 3rd grade. It felt rehearsed. Cold. Guests only. No titles. Karen sat down slowly, knees giving out. No mom. No dad. Just, guest. She tried to speak, but her throat caught. I raised her, she murmured. I kissed her bruises. I taught her to swim. I sat by her bed every time she had night terrors. Mark sat beside her, saying nothing. I memorized her laugh. I knew when it changed, Karen whispered. When it went from real to pretend. She gripped the card like it might bite her. And now she calls us strangers? Mark reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. No, she said, voice hardening. Something's not right. He looked at her, surprised. Karen. She's not just angry. This isn't just rebellion. It's like we've been edited out of her memory. Her voice cracked. She loved me. She needed me. And now, she doesn't want us there as anything but names on a list? The silence settled over them like dust. Outside, the wind moved the oak trees gently, the same ones Lina used to climb barefoot, laughing. Karen looked at the card again. No titles. No warmth. No explanation. But buried in her chest was something worse than pain. It was fear. Because if Lina had rewritten the past, what had she remembered that Karen had tried to forget? Everyone thought we adopted her, but the truth was much murkier, much more fragile. Lina's biological mother's name surfaces in a therapy journal Karen finds, one she never knew existed. Karen stared out the kitchen window the next morning, the lavender card still sitting untouched on the table like a crime scene photo. Mark had gone out early, said he needed to clear his head, but she knew he was avoiding the house. Or maybe just her silence. She moved through the hallway slowly, her hand brushing the wall where Lina's height had been marked in faded pencil notches. 6 years, Lina, can I be taller than the moon? Karen had laughed when she wrote it. The hallway felt like a tunnel now, one that led straight into a room no one had entered in months. Lina's room. She opened the door. It still smelled faintly of citrus shampoo and old candle wax. On the bookshelf, picture frames were turned face down. Karen hadn't done that. She sat on the edge of the bed and reached under the mattress. Exactly where Lina had always hidden things. There, an old sketchbook. Worn at the edges. The cover said, Creative Journal, but inside were no drawings. Just pages of dense, scribbled handwriting. Karen's pulse picked up. The entries weren't dated, but they were raw. Stream of consciousness pain. Torn memories. She told me I was hers. But I still dream of a woman who smelled like roses and cigarettes. Who had a scar on her lip. Who sang in Spanish. Karen's hands began to shake. She flipped through more pages. I'm not sure what's real. But I remember the woman in the hallway. I remember her screaming. Then, near the center, a name, scrawled over and over. Marisol. 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 Karen froze. She'd never heard that name before. It didn't belong to any social worker. Not to any neighbor. Not to any relative they'd ever discussed. She turned to the last page. One single line. If I find her, I'll know who stole me. Karen dropped the notebook. The room blurred. Stole. The word slammed through her like a cold wind. They hadn't adopted Lina. Everyone just assumed. She and Mark never corrected them. It was easier that way. Cleaner. Lina had come to them at 4 years old, left by a distant friend of a friend, a woman who said she couldn't care for her child anymore. It wasn't official. There were no papers. No signatures. Just a whisper of obligation and desperation. Karen told herself she was saving a child. Now, she wondered what she'd really done. Outside, the wind blew hard against the window. A gust rattled the glass, like a warning. Karen looked down at the journal on the floor. A single name glowing like fire. Marisol. She looked straight through me, like I was wallpaper. Lina's fiancé whispers to Karen, "You're not in the slideshow. She said you were just neighbors." The rose garden smelled like lilies and money. Karen's heels clicked too loudly on the polished floor as she stepped inside, hand tightening around the gift bag, an ivory onesie with hand-stitched stars, the kind she used to make for Lina when she was little. Back when she still said mommy. Now, just Karen. If anything. Mark was already by the drinks table, jaw tight, face expressionless, his default mode when things hurt too much. He nodded at her, but his eyes said, "You sure you want to do this?" She wasn't. But she had to. Lina stood near the front, radiant in a pale blue dress that hugged her baby bump. Her long hair curled gently, her smile photogenic. There were balloons, floral arches, and polished platitudes on chalkboards. A baby fills a place in your heart you never knew was empty. Karen's heart was empty. She watched Lina hug people, laugh, glow. She didn't see her. Or maybe she did, and just didn't care. Then, finally, their eyes met. And Karen felt it. Recognition. Then erasure. Lina blinked, her smile faltering for only a heartbeat. Then it returned, wider, thinner, for someone behind Karen. She walked right past them. Mark moved closer, whispering, "She saw us. She definitely saw us." Karen's breath hitched. Maybe she's overwhelmed. But then, the microphone clicked. A woman in a mauve dress took the stage. "Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining Lina and Elijah to celebrate this beautiful next chapter." Elijah, Lina's fiancé, stood beside her, arm around her waist, eyes soft and adoring. The host continued, "Family is everything. Especially the family that raised us, taught us, shaped us. Lina has been surrounded by love her whole life." Karen's lips parted slightly. From her grandmother Elena, her aunt Camila, her mother Marisol, who we remember today. Karen blinked. Did she hear that right? And now, with Elijah, she's beginning her own. She felt her knees buckle. Mark caught her arm. Marisol. The name from the journal. The name Karen had never heard until a day ago. Now said aloud, like a prayer. Like a monument. There was polite applause. Then, the slideshow began. Childhood photos. A tiny girl in a red coat. A birthday cake. A school recital. Not one photo from their home. Not one with Karen. Karen's breath caught in her throat. She turned to Mark, his jaw clenched, fists curling. People around them watched, smiled, clapped. Karen felt like she was watching her own funeral, buried under revisionist memories. Then Elijah, soft-spoken, kind-eyed, appeared beside her. I'm sorry," he said under his breath, eyes darting toward Lina. Karen looked at him, her voice barely a whisper. "What is this?" She said it was complicated. That it's better to not confuse things. Karen stared at him, stunned. He added, quieter, "She said you were just neighbors. That you helped sometimes, but you weren't official." Karen's breath left her. Not official. Just neighbors. All the years. The scraped knees. The birthday cakes. The night terror suit. The lullabies sung during storms. Gone. She used to cry for me in her sleep. Now she won't look me in the eye. A note tucked inside a storybook reads, "You lied about what happened to me." The drive home was wordless. The baby shower gift sat unopened in the back seat, its white ribbon now slightly crushed. Karen stared straight ahead, her fists tight in her lap. Mark offered nothing but silence. He knew better than to try. When they pulled into the driveway, dusk had already turned the sky to charcoal. The porch light flickered once before going out, like even the house was losing the will to stay warm. Inside, Karen dropped her purse on the floor and walked straight to the hallway. Her feet carried her by instinct, the same path she'd walked 1,000 times before bedtime, when Lina would beg for just one more story. She opened the door to her daughter's room. It had become a ghost exhibit. Posters had yellowed. Plush animals slumped forward. The bedspread still had a faint stain from the night Lina spilled grape juice and cried for hours, terrified she'd ruined everything. Karen sat on the bed and closed her eyes. She could still hear it, the tiny voice whispering in the dark, "Don't let her take me back, Mommy. Please." Back then, Karen had held her close and said, "You're safe now. She can't hurt you anymore." And for years, she believed that was true. She opened the nightstand drawer, nothing but broken pencils and old friendship bracelets. Then she stood, scanned the bookshelves. Half were unread. Lina had loved the covers more than the stories, until one book, The Cloud Rabbit. A bedtime favorite. Worn, corner folded, spine cracked from repetition. Karen pulled it down. As she flipped through the pages, something thin fluttered out and landed at her feet. A folded note. Childlike handwriting, shaky, but fresh. She opened it. You lied about what happened to me. Karen's heart lurched. The room felt suddenly colder. She stared at the paper. The ink was smudged in places, like it had been written with hesitation, or tears. She read it again, then again. Her fingers trembled. This wasn't from years ago. This was new. Maybe even written after Lina left. Karen rose slowly, scanning the shelves. Her eyes caught something else, a line of books pushed unevenly. She reached behind them and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside, a cracked charm bracelet. One Karen had never seen. It had tiny silver letters, Marisol. The world seemed to tilt slightly beneath her feet. Lina had kept something. A piece of her real past, hidden here, like a secret heartbeat. Karen sat back down on the bed, clutching the bracelet in one hand and the note in the other. You lied about what happened to me. But what exactly did she lie about? Was it the abuse? The disappearance? The rescue? Or was the biggest lie, that this had ever been Lina's real home at all? A quiet creak echoed from the hallway. Mark appeared, leaning in the doorway, eyes dark. Karen, he said softly. Come to bed. She didn't answer. Just stared out the window, into the growing dark. What if we weren't the saviors? What if we were just the safest option available? Mark receives a legal letter. Lina is contesting their guardianship claim retroactively. Mark stood in the garage, staring at the shelf with the cracked paint can and the half-fixed sprinkler head. He wasn't fixing anything. He just needed distance. Walls. Karen hadn't come to bed. He heard her pacing hours into the night. Then silence. He didn't check. He remembered when Lina first came to them, how small she was, how she clung to Karen's shirt and wouldn't let go. Everyone thought Karen was the one Lina needed most. But it had been Mark who taught her how to ride a bike. He'd been the one who stayed with her during her flu, watched all 3 Toy Story movies in one night with her because she hated the sound of vomiting alone. Still, she never called him Dad. Not once. He walked to his workbench and opened the drawer, the one with old receipts, junk, and paper clips. Inside, neatly folded, the last letter Lina had written to him before she left. A plain thank you card. Mark, thanks for everything. Really. You were always calm when things felt stormy. I'll never forget that. That was it. Nothing else. Not I love you. Not I'll miss you. Just, thanks. He had read it 20 times that first week. Then stopped. He never told Karen. Mark exhaled slowly and leaned against the counter. There were things he had never said. Not to Karen. Not even to himself. Like how sometimes he felt like Karen had been too eager to keep Lina, like it filled something in her she never spoke of. Or how the day Lina came to them, Karen didn't hesitate. Didn't call the police. Didn't contact social services. She just tucked the girl into Emily's old bed like it had been waiting. Emily. He still had nightmares. The lake. The silence. The empty space in the back seat. He pushed the memory away. A sharp knock on the garage door broke his spiral. He opened it to find a courier, young, awkward, holding a clipboard. Delivery for Mark Holloway. Needs signature. Mark signed without thinking. The man left. He looked down at the envelope. From the law offices of Howard and Gibbons. He stepped inside, closed the garage door with a thud, and opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside. Notice of request for retroactive guardianship dispute, Lina Grace Holloway, birth name, Lina Marisol Ortega. The client disputes legal or de facto claims of custody or parental authority by Karen and Mark Holloway and asserts that any past arrangements were unauthorized and without legal standing. Mark sank into the hallway chair. Unauthorized. Without legal standing. His hands shook. Karen had never pursued formal guardianship. Said it would complicate things. That Lina didn't need more bureaucracy, she needed stability. But now, that decision could unravel everything. He read the letter again, then again. His eyes fixated on one line. Client reserves the right to pursue public clarification of false narratives surrounding her upbringing. False narratives. He didn't know whether to laugh or break something. Karen would fall apart. This would wreck her. And yet, somewhere deep in Mark's chest was a small, traitorous whisper. What if she's right? What if they had built a lie so carefully it felt like love? He tucked the letter under his jacket and walked up the stairs, his footsteps heavy. Karen's door was closed. He didn't knock. She asked me once, what if I remembered more? I told her not to. Lina says coldly, you didn't raise me. You erased me. Rain painted the windshield in long, chaotic streaks as Karen pulled into the parking lot of the Garden Cafe where Lina had agreed, reluctantly, to meet. The same place they'd once come for Lina's 8th birthday, where she'd eaten too much chocolate cake and fell asleep in Karen's lap. That child no longer existed. Lina was already seated inside by the window, untouched tea in front of her. Her face was calm, perfectly still, but her eyes were sharp, like she'd rehearsed this moment, expected a battle. Karen stepped in, soaked despite the umbrella, heart pounding. Lina didn't stand. Didn't smile. Just watched her sit down like a stranger taking the wrong seat. Karen tried to speak, but her voice caught. So it was Lina who broke the silence. You came. I didn't think you would. I had to, Karen said softly. For closure? For truth. Lina laughed once. No humor. Karen leaned forward, placing a small envelope on the table, the charm bracelet. Marisol's name glinting faintly under the cafe's dim lights. Lina's jaw tensed. Where did you find that? She asked, already knowing the answer. In your room, Karen replied gently. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for a memory. You found a lot more than that, Lina said, her voice a quiet blade. Karen hesitated. Lina, I need to know, do you remember anything? About how you came to us? Lina's smile faded. I remember stories. Yours. Ones you told me until I forgot mine. Karen blinked. I was trying to protect you. From what? Lina snapped, louder now. From a mother who may have been poor or chaotic, but still mine. You never asked me if I wanted to stay. You just kept me. Karen's chest tightened. She left you with us, Lina. She walked away. You cried for hours. I was 4. Lina's voice cracked. Children cry when someone leaves the room. That doesn't mean they're abandoned. It means they don't understand yet. Karen reached across the table, desperate. I loved you. I still love you. Every single day, I chose you. Lina pulled back, folding her arms. You chose a version of me that fit your loss. You lost Emily. And I became, what? A replacement? A second draft? Karen shook her head, but her eyes betrayed the truth. Lina leaned in, her voice low, full of cold clarity. You didn't raise me. You erased me. Karen's lips parted, but no sound came. You didn't tell me her name, Lina continued, voice steady. You didn't tell me about Marisol. You didn't tell me I had a language, a culture, a mother out there, until it all came back in flashes, and journals you never knew I'd find. Karen's hands trembled. She hurt you, she whispered. She was unfit. I was trying to save you. Lina's eyes welled for the first time. But she didn't blink. Then why do I still feel taken? Silence settled like ash. Outside, thunder rolled far off. The rain blurred the world into streaks of gray and white. Karen wiped at her cheeks, though she hadn't noticed she was crying. I never wanted to steal you, she whispered. Lina looked away, toward the window. I know, she said quietly. But you did anyway. She stood, gathering her coat. Karen tried one last time. What will you tell your daughter about us? Lina paused, back turned. The truth, she said. So she never has to wonder. A podcast team reached out. They want to tell Lina's side. And only hers. Karen listens to a clip. Lina says, I think they were trying to replace a child they lost. The email came at 6:02 a.m. Karen read it 3 times before she understood the meaning, and even then, it didn't fully land. Hello Karen. We are producers at American Fracture, a podcast dedicated to untangling complex family histories. We've recently interviewed your former foster daughter, Lina Grace Holloway, née Ortega, for an upcoming series. We are reaching out for comment or possible participation. If not, we understand and will proceed accordingly. Karen's hands went numb. American Fracture. She knew the name. Everyone did. It was always trending on true crime Reddit. Always featured in those top 10 most haunting family secrets YouTube videos. She clicked the link in the email. The teaser image made her stomach turn. Lina, visibly pregnant, sitting in soft lighting, hands resting gently on her stomach. Above her head, a title. EP1, The Girl Who Was Raised by Strangers. Karen closed the laptop. She couldn't breathe. Downstairs, Mark sipped his coffee in silence. She hadn't told him yet about the cafe meeting. About the bracelet. About Lina's words. She sat beside him, eyes hollow. He noticed. You okay? She handed him the phone with the email still open. He read it quietly. Then, she's going public. Karen nodded. Her mouth wouldn't work. That afternoon, the episode dropped. Karen listened with trembling hands, alone in her car, parked at the end of a grocery store parking lot. It felt safer than their house, where memories echoed louder than voices. The podcast opened with gentle piano music. Then Lina's voice, recorded, calm but full of depth. I used to think I was lucky. I thought someone had rescued me. That I was given a second chance. But second chances don't erase the first ones, they just bury them. And eventually, buried things come back. Karen's eyes flooded instantly. Lina continued. I was 4 when I went to live with the Holloways. They weren't bad people. But they weren't mine. And what they gave me was not the life I lost, but a new script. A cleaner one. A pause. I had a mother. Her name was Marisol. She smelled like sugar and lavender oil. She sang to me. She made mistakes, but she loved me. And one day, she was just gone. They never told me why. Karen gripped the steering wheel. The host interjected, "You believe you were taken?" Lina's voice was soft, but unwavering. "I think I was edited. I think I was overwritten. I think they were trying to replace a child they lost." Karen turned off the engine. Silence swallowed the space around her. That line repeated in her head, like a skipping record. They were trying to replace a child they lost. The worst part was, she couldn't deny it. Not fully. Emily's photo still sat on their mantel. Emily's shoes were still in the attic. Emily's middle name, Grace, now echoed in Lina's. She had always told herself it was a coincidence. Now, she wasn't so sure. Her phone buzzed with a notification. American Fracture EP1, trending number 4 on Spotify podcasts. She dropped the phone onto the passenger seat. Outside, people pushed shopping carts, loaded groceries, lived normal lives. Inside the car, Karen's world had tilted completely. "There's a grave in our hometown. A child with my last name. Born and died the year before Lina arrived." Karen opens Emily's box. Inside is a photo of Emily and Lina, together. The grave was small, smaller than Karen remembered. A white marble headstone, nestled under a crooked oak tree in the oldest part of town. The cemetery was nearly empty, the sky overcast. Even the birds seemed to know not to sing. Karen stood alone, hands clutching a single daisy, staring at the engraving she had memorized years ago. Emily June Holloway. April 1998 to July 2002. Forever our light. The daisy slipped from her fingers. 4 years. That was all Emily had. Except something was wrong. She kneeled, brushing dirt from the edges. And for the first time, something shifted in her gut, like the ground itself was lying. She pulled out her phone and scrolled to the photo she'd found 2 nights earlier, buried deep in an old email folder. A scanned image sent to her by a cousin, a group photo at a family barbecue, a week before the accident. Karen zoomed in. 2 little girls, side by side. Emily, unmistakable, light hair, wide grin. And next to her, another girl. Dark hair. Slightly taller. A nervous smile. Lina. But that couldn't be. Lina hadn't come to them until a year after Emily's death. Except, there she was. In the same photo. The date in the file's metadata confirmed it. June 2002. Karen's throat tightened. She stood, backing away from the grave. What if this wasn't real? What if the timeline, the one she and Mark had told themselves for decades, was wrong? What if it had never been just Emily's death, but a disappearance? A vanishing act wrapped in grief? Her hands shook as she opened her car and drove home on autopilot, every corner of the town blurring like a forgotten dream. Back in the house, she climbed the attic stairs. There, under the old baby clothes and dusty books, was the box. Emily's box. Karen hadn't opened it in years. Inside, drawings, baby shoes, a hairbrush. A music box that no longer worked. And then, at the very bottom, an envelope labeled in faded marker, Summer 2002. She opened it. Inside was a photo she didn't remember taking. Emily and Lina, side by side. But here, they weren't smiling. They looked, afraid. Behind them, a dark cabin wall. A red life vest hanging on a nail. The lake. Karen dropped the photo like it burned her. That summer had always been fuzzy. The trauma, the panic, the confusion. The authorities had called it a tragic accident, a child presumed drowned. No body recovered. Karen had grieved with every cell in her body. But now, she wasn't sure who she had buried. And worse, she wasn't sure who she had kept. She sat down, the photo trembling in her hands. Had Lina been there all along? Had there been a swap, intentional or accidental? Or had grief simply painted over reality until it resembled something livable? Downstairs, the wind picked up. A door creaked somewhere in the hall. Karen couldn't move. She said she was raised by kind people. She just couldn't remember their names. But she remembered the lake. The therapist reveals, she used to draw the same woman every week, and it wasn't you. The clinic hadn't changed. Same pale green walls, same flickering ceiling light in the reception area. Karen sat with her hands folded in her lap, watching a child across the room build and destroy towers of blocks in a rhythmic loop. The therapist, Dr. Anna Wells, came out wearing a polite smile and soft gray sweater. She looked older than Karen remembered, or maybe trauma aged everyone at once. "Karen," she said gently. "It's been a while." They sat in her office, surrounded by books and muted artwork, the kind designed to make pain feel manageable. "I wouldn't normally do this," Dr. Wells said, fingers interlocked on her desk, "but I heard the podcast. And I know how disorienting this must be." Karen didn't speak. Just waited. Dr. Wells sighed. "You want to know what Lina told me back then? What she remembered? What she didn't?" Karen nodded. "She was guarded," Dr. Wells began. "More than most children her age. She rarely cried. Rarely laughed. But she had this fragility beneath the surface. As if her identity was a set of clothes someone else picked out." Karen clenched her hands. "She told me once," the therapist continued, "I feel like I have two brains. One that remembers, and one that's always trying to forget." Karen swallowed. "Did she mention Marisol?" she asked, voice shaking. Dr. Wells nodded. "She didn't use the name at first. But she described a woman, warm, smelled like lavender. Scar on her upper lip. Used to sing in a language she didn't understand." Karen's chest burned. "She said she remembered the lake," Dr. Wells added softly. "Said she used to dream about a dock, a storm, and a voice calling her name from the trees." Karen looked up sharply. That was the night we—" "I know," the therapist said. Karen stared at her. Do you think she ever confused Emily and herself? Or Marisol and me?" Dr. Wells hesitated, then reached for a folder on her desk. "She drew this every week. 4 months. She handed Karen a crinkled piece of paper, faded with age. A child's drawing. 2 women. One tall, with red hair and long arms, Karen's unmistakable silhouette. The other, smaller, with darker skin, short hair, and a jagged red line across her lip. The child, a small figure in the middle, stood between them, arms outstretched, face blank. Karen's breath caught. She said both were her mother's. But neither felt real. Dr. Wells leaned forward. "Karen, trauma can split memory. She may not know which life is true because both were built on silence. On missing information." Karen stared at the drawing. "I raised her," she whispered. Dr. Wells nodded. "But someone else named her. Someone else started her story." Karen's voice broke. "And now, she's trying to finish it without me." Dr. Wells didn't answer. Karen stood to leave, the paper still in her hand. She paused at the door. "She used to draw the same woman every week," she said, echoing the therapist's words. Dr. Wells met her gaze. And it wasn't you, she confirmed softly. In the photo, she's smiling. Behind her, a hand clutches her shoulder. The old woman screams, "You promised you'd bring her back." The address was faded on the envelope. Karen stared at the handwritten return label, E. Ortega, scrawled with a pen running low on ink, the zip code barely legible. It was tucked in the back of Lina's childhood journal, behind pages of forgotten crayon sketches and fragmented sentences that never made sense, until now. The return address led her to a low-income neighborhood 2 towns over, tucked behind a gas station and an abandoned paint store. The house was quiet. White paint peeled off the siding. A sagging porch chair leaned against a boarded window like it had given up years ago. Karen parked across the street, heart thudding against her ribs like it wanted out. The air was thick with the smell of wet grass and rotting wood. She walked slowly to the door and knocked, once, twice. No answer. She turned to leave, then the door creaked open. A woman, older than Karen expected, stood in the doorway. Her face was lined, her hair long and silver, braided down one shoulder. She squinted. "Marisol?" the woman whispered, voice trembling. Karen froze. "No," she said quickly, But the woman's eyes filled with tears. "You came back," she said, stepping forward. "You came back after all this time." Karen blinked. "You think I'm?" The woman grabbed her wrist. "Where is she? Where's Lina?" Karen swallowed. I raised her," she said quietly. "I'm Karen Holloway." The woman's face changed instantly, joy curdling into rage. "You?" she hissed. "You're the one." Karen stumbled back. I'm not who you think." "You took her," the woman growled. "You said it was just for a little while. You said you'd bring her back." Karen's mouth went dry. "You're her grandmother?" "Her blood," she spat. "Her real family." She pointed a crooked finger at Karen's chest. "You came in the middle of the night. Said her mother was unfit. Said you'd give her safety." Karen shook her head. "That's not how it happened." The woman's voice rose. You promised she'd come back." Karen stepped back, shaking. "I was told she was abandoned. Left with us." "She wasn't left, you liar," the woman snapped. "She was stolen." The word cut through Karen like a blade. Stolen. She couldn't breathe. The old woman stared at her, chest heaving, eyes wet with fury. "You knew she had a family. And you kept her anyway." Karen's voice was barely a whisper. "I loved her." "You needed her," the woman corrected. "You had a hole and you filled it with our child." A heavy silence fell between them. Then, the woman stepped back into the shadow of the doorway. Before closing the door, she said one final thing. "You may have raised her. But you don't get to own her story." The door slammed. Karen stood there, trembling, unable to move. Stolen. Owned. She walked back to the car like a ghost, heart pounding in her ears. At a red light on the way home, she opened the glove compartment. Inside, a photo Mark had stashed years ago, a snapshot from that long-ago lake trip. Lina, smiling. Behind her, a woman's hand rested on her shoulder. Karen had always assumed it was her own. Now she looked again. The scar on the knuckle. The skin tone. The ring. It wasn't her. It was Marisol. "We thought it was just where we went to escape. Turns out, it's where everything was buried." Karen revisits the cabin, and finds a box labeled "For Emily." From Mom. The lake hadn't changed. It still smelled like pine needles and damp soil. The water still whispered against the dock like it was keeping secrets. The cabin stood at the edge of the woods, smaller now, somehow, shrunken by time and memory. Karen parked on the gravel road and stepped out slowly. The silence here was dense. Like grief. She walked the path she knew by heart, the same one they'd taken every summer before everything fell apart. Her boots crunched against the underbrush, the sound sharp in the hush. The cabin door creaked as she pushed it open. Inside, dust, cobwebs, forgotten time. A stack of chairs in the corner, a fireplace long cold, faded curtains hanging limp over grime-streaked windows. She moved like a ghost through the space, hands brushing the wooden table where Emily used to sit with juice boxes and markers. Where Lina had once fallen asleep with her head on Karen's lap after a storm. Or was it the other way around? The memories twisted. She walked to the back room, the smallest one. Emily's room, once. The bed frame still stood, mattress gone. She knelt, hand searching under the floorboard where she had once hidden snacks during storms. Instead, she found a box. Cardboard, worn at the corners. A child's name written on the side. For Emily. From Mom. Karen stared at it, breath caught. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside, a doll with tangled hair. A drawing, stick figures of a woman, a man, and two little girls standing by water. Then, a letter. Written in childish handwriting. Dear Mommy. Thank you for bringing me here. I like the lake. I like the other girl. She cries a lot but I give her my bear and she stops. I don't think she remembers her name. I don't either, sometimes. Karen's heart nearly stopped. The other girl? She flipped the page. Another drawing, two girls, same size, but one drawn with red hair like Emily's. The other with darker skin. Both holding hands. Below it, a scrawl. We switched shoes. She said we could be twins. Karen sat back hard, the floor groaning beneath her weight. Twins. Her mind raced. That summer, the storm, the confusion, the way Emily vanished without a trace. She had searched and screamed and swore she saw a girl in the woods. But, what if it hadn't been Emily she'd seen running? What if it had been Lina? Or, what if they'd both been there, and in the panic, in the terror? What if she'd saved the wrong child? Karen pressed her fist to her mouth, shaking. She'd built her life around a memory, the child she thought she'd lost. But the evidence in her hands suggested something far worse. She may have confused them. Or, chosen one over the other. Not intentionally. But memory didn't need intention to be fatal. She stood slowly, clutching the box, staring at the lake through the cracked window. The place she'd always returned to for peace had never been peaceful at all. It had always been a graveyard of truth. As she stepped outside, the wind picked up, and from somewhere in the woods, a child's voice echoed faintly, calling, "Mom?" She's naming her daughter after someone. But not us. Karen receives a message, "If you come to the birth, I'll call the police." Karen hadn't slept. The lake hadn't left her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it, the two girls in the drawing, the storm creeping in, the unbearable possibility that she had picked a daughter like someone picks a door in a burning house. She was in the living room now, staring at her phone screen, rereading Lina's latest post. A sonogram image. The baby curled, head bowed like it was listening. And beneath it, in cursive. "Can't wait to meet you, little Marisol Grace." Karen's throat tightened. She reread the name, Marisol Grace. The first, her biological mother. The second, the middle name Karen had given her. Was it a peace offering? A compromise? Or just coincidence? Karen didn't know. She clicked on the comments. Hundreds of congratulations. Heart emojis. Strangers praising Lina's strength. Her story. Her truth. Not one mention of Karen. Not one thread acknowledging that another woman, flawed, desperate, maybe even wrong, had spent 2 decades pouring herself into Lina like a second womb. The silence around Karen's name was louder than any insult. Her phone buzzed again. A message. From Lina. No subject. Just a line of cold, emotionless text. I don't want you at the hospital. If you come to the birth, I'll call the police. Karen stared at it. Her thumb hovered over the keyboard. Her mind raced for some combination of words, apology, plea, explanation. But there were none left. She set the phone down and walked to the nursery. The one that had once been Emily's. Then Lina's. Then no one's. She opened the closet. The baby clothes still hung there, stitched stars and tiny socks and crocheted blankets. The ones she had made with aching fingers in the weeks after Lina left, when she thought maybe, she'd come back. She touched one of the onesies, soft and untouched. Now, there was another child on the way. One who would never know her name. Karen sat down in the old rocking chair. The same one where she had once nursed Emily, once read stories to Lina, once cried into a stuffed giraffe in the middle of the night. Now she just rocked. Back and forth. Back and forth. The chair creaked. The walls breathed. And somewhere in the distance, another version of her life, the one where none of this happened, unraveled. Karen looked at the crib one last time. Then she picked up her phone and deleted the last photo of Lina from her gallery. He's booking tickets. One way. He says maybe we were the strangers all along. Karen finds the goodbye note. It ends with, I forgive you. But I can't follow you. Mark stood in the garage, the cool air wrapping around him like a secret. The house had grown too quiet, not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the kind that echoed guilt in every corner. Even the walls seemed to listen now. He opened his laptop and stared at the screen. One-way ticket. Portland to Anchorage. Departure, Saturday. He hadn't told Karen. Couldn't. This wasn't punishment. It wasn't revenge. It was survival. He clicked confirm. The email chimed with a dull finality. He stood for a moment, staring at the confirmation like it might vanish. Then, slowly, he walked back inside. Karen was in the kitchen, staring blankly at a cold cup of tea. Her eyes were distant, unfocused, like she was living inside a version of reality only she could see. He watched her from the hallway. She hadn't asked where he'd gone. Not in days. She used to notice everything, the way he held his coffee, the way his voice cracked when he was tired. Now, nothing. He walked past her, silently. Upstairs, he opened his nightstand drawer and pulled out a small envelope. The one he'd sealed the night after the podcast dropped. He placed it on the pillow. Then packed the smallest bag he could, just enough for a new start. A change of clothes. A photo of Emily, the real one, folded and creased at the corners. Downstairs again, he paused by the front door. Karen hadn't moved. He thought about saying goodbye. Then realized it wouldn't make a difference. He opened the door. And left. Karen found the note 2 hours later. She'd gone upstairs to ask him something, she wasn't sure what anymore. Maybe about dinner. Maybe about the silence. Maybe about the part of her that was slowly sinking without screaming. The room was too clean. The drawer, slightly ajar. The closet, emptier than she remembered. Then her eyes landed on the envelope. Her name in Mark's even handwriting. She opened it. Karen. You did what you thought was right. And maybe, in some ways, it was. But right isn't the same as true. I loved her too. But I never forgot she wasn't ours. I kept pretending for you. For us. But I can't anymore. I need to remember who I am without this house, without this grief. Without this lie. I forgive you. But I can't follow you. M. Karen folded the note slowly. She sat on the edge of the bed, the empty space beside her suddenly massive. Mark was gone. Not angrily. Not cruelly. Just, quietly. Completely. The last piece of her former life had walked out the door, carrying a memory of a child they'd both lost, or confused, or never truly knew. She stared at the window. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves into soft spirals. And inside, Karen realized the silence wasn't just grief anymore. It was abandonment. On the dresser, where Mark's wallet used to be, sat one last thing, a photo of Lina as a child, and on the back, scrawled in Mark's writing, "We did love her. Whatever the truth is, we did. No one told us. But we knew the moment it happened." A nurse walks out, holding a package. She said you should have this. But nothing more. The silence wasn't different at first. Same empty rooms. Same cold sheets. Same kitchen full of untouched dishes. But at 3:17 a.m. Karen sat upright in bed, wide awake, with no sound, no message, no notification. And still, she knew. Lina had given birth. The house felt it. It was like something invisible had been severed. Or born. Karen went to the kitchen, hands shaking, pouring water she wouldn't drink. She looked at the calendar on the fridge. August 12th, the due date. She hadn't forgotten. She just wasn't supposed to remember. She sat in the dark, watching the clock tick forward. Every second louder than the last. By noon, the sun had broken through. But it felt hollow, like light visiting a grave. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps at the door. She hesitated. Opened it. A young nurse stood there, clearly not from around the neighborhood. Her scrubs were bright teal. Her eyes kind. "Karen Holloway?" she asked. Karen nodded, a breath caught in her throat. The nurse held out a small white box, tied with a single ribbon. "She said you should have this. But nothing more." Karen blinked. The nurse offered nothing else. Just turned, walked back to her car, and drove off. Karen closed the door gently. Sat on the floor like she couldn't trust her legs to hold her. She stared at the box. The ribbon was soft, like something from a nursery. She untied it. Inside, a photo. Black and white. A newborn swaddled in a striped blanket, tiny mouth yawning, one hand curled into a fist. Beneath the photo, a card. Not handwritten. Just typed. "Her name is Marisol Grace Holloway." That's the only part one kept. Karen's breath left her. Holloway. Not Ortega. Not a complete erasure. Just, partial. Like a name stitched onto the edge of a blanket, barely visible, but still there. She held the photo to her chest. Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't fall. Not yet. She sat for hours, the box beside her, the house breathing softly around her, empty, but no longer directionless. Lina hadn't forgiven her. But she hadn't forgotten either. And maybe, that was enough. Karen walked to the nursery and placed the photo on the empty shelf. For the first time in years, the room didn't feel haunted. Just waiting. It's all gone now. The cabin. The child. The story we told ourselves. Even if I forget, I still feel it. That's how I know who's real. Karen parked farther down the trail this time. The path was overgrown now, the brush higher, the air denser, as if nature had reclaimed what memory once held hostage. She walked without rushing. Each step slower than the last. The cabin was gone. Burned down in a wildfire 2 seasons ago. She'd read about it in the local paper. Didn't cry then. Couldn't. Now, all that remained was a patch of scorched ground and a few melted nails embedded in the earth. No foundation. No walls. No history left standing. Karen stood at the edge, box in hand. Inside, the cassette tape. She'd found it inside the package Lina had sent, buried beneath the photo. An old recording. Unlabeled. She had borrowed a neighbor's dusty tape player, played it once. That was enough. Now, she pressed play again. The voice that emerged was unmistakably Lina's, small, cautious, no older than 6. Sometimes I feel like there's another me. One that knows stuff I'm not supposed to. A pause. I think Mommy gets scared when I talk about her. The other her. But I remember the lady with the red hair too. I remember she cried when I got sick. Karen sat on the dock, tears finally falling, slow and warm. I don't know which one was my real mommy. Then, a long silence. Breathing. And finally. Even if I forget, I still feel it. That's how I know who's real. The tape clicked off. Karen stood. She walked to the edge of the dock, the water still and mirror-like beneath her. She held the tape out. Then let it go. It hit the water with a soft plunk, floated for a moment, then sank, taking with it everything unsaid, everything unbearable. She stayed there a while. No longer waiting for Lina to return. No longer clutching her version of the truth like a badge. Just, still. Just letting go. Then, slowly, she turned. Walked back up the trail. No fanfare. No final plea. Just a woman walking away from the only story she'd ever believed in. The wind whispered through the trees. And if you listened closely, it sounded like a child laughing in 2 voices. Even if I forget, I still feel it. That's how I know who's real.